Dustin shocked me because we were shooting a scene.
This. Look, you're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to do it. I'm gonna have to do it.
I'm very sorry about this.
My wine glass was sitting there, and he just with his hand, brushed it so that it whizzed by my nose and broke on the wall and little pieces of glass.
No one ever expected this from Meryl Streep. For nearly 5 decades, she protected her reputation with the grace of a diplomat. No scandals, no feuds, no public grudges. But at 76, something cracked. In a rare moment of disarming honesty, she finally admitted the truth. There were actors she didn't just clash with. She hated them. And when the names left her lips, Hollywood froze. These weren't minor co-stars or forgotten rivals. They were giants, icons audiences believed she admired, even adored. But Streep's confession didn't stop at the names. She revealed exactly what each of them did with a level of brutal clarity that stunned even her closest colleagues. Once you hear the reasons, you'll never watch their scenes the same way again. Let's begin. Number 1, Alec Baldwin. Meryl Streep, acting has always been a discipline, deliberate, precise, and rooted in emotional truth. She enters every scene only after dissecting motivations, rhythms, and intentions with absolute care. Alec Baldwin, however, thrives on spontaneity. For him, authenticity comes from instinct improvisation and whatever joke or line feels right in the moment. When the two were cast together in It's Complicated, Nancy Meyers hoped their differences would create balance. Instead, it triggered one of the quietest but most intense creative clashes of Streep's career. From the first week on set, crew members sensed it. The tension, the stiffness in Streep's posture whenever Baldwin rewrote a line mid-scene, the way Baldwin shrugged off her precision as overthinking. Streep never confronted him openly, but her frustration slipped through in rare moments. After one disrupted rehearsal, she was heard saying, "Comedy has to be grounded in truth, otherwise it's just noise." To her, Baldwin's unpredictability undermined the emotional core of the film. Baldwin, meanwhile, saw her controlled approach as limiting. He defended his style with a grin, telling a producer, "Truth happens in the moment. If you rehearse it to death, it dies." Years later, Streep described their dynamic carefully, offering only, "We had different philosophies." For someone as diplomatic as Streep, that was a pointed statement. Baldwin tended to joke about the tension. "Oh, Meryl hated me, absolutely, but I was having too much fun." But behind the humor, he acknowledged they never fully connected. "We didn't always mix." The feud never became public fireworks, yet it quietly shaped their careers. Streep reportedly declined several later projects that involved Baldwin, and the two have not worked together since. Today, their relationship exists in polite distance. Cordial at events, respectful in interviews, but clearly separated by irreconcilable creative styles. Number 2, Kevin Kline. To Meryl Streep, acting has never been a matter of instinct or charm. It is labor, months of preparation, immersion, and discipline built from the inside out. Long before cameras roll, she constructs a character piece by piece, rooting every detail in truth. That is the code she lives by. Kevin Kline could not have been more different. Where Streep demanded structure, Kline thrived on impulse. He liked to move through a scene loosely, letting spontaneity shape choices in the moment. He believed the best acting came from not planning, from allowing instinct to guide him where logic could not. So when the two were paired in Sophie's Choice, 1982, it looked from the outside like perfect casting. Two brilliant actors, one devastating story, chemistry that felt effortless. But inside the rehearsal rooms, the atmosphere was far from harmonious. Streep spent months studying Holocaust survivor testimonies, working with dialect coaches, and building Sophie's fractured psychology with agonizing precision. She learned both Polish and German, believing Sophie's shifting voice was central to understanding her trauma. Kline found this excessive. During a tense rehearsal, he reportedly stopped abruptly and asked her, "Are you sure the audience cares more about your vowel sounds than what she's feeling?" To Streep, that wasn't a question. It was a wound. Sophie's voice was her trauma, the dislocation, the cultural fracture, the identity torn apart. Kline's remark dismissed the very foundation of her process, and the divide only deepened. After filming, Kline made the mistake of commenting in interviews that Streep's method was a bit academic. He almost certainly meant it casually, perhaps even respectfully. But for Streep, who had bled emotionally for that role, hearing her process reduced to academia was a quiet slap in the face. Crew members later said the shift was immediate. Cordiality remained, but warmth evaporated. A producer recalled she respected his talent, but after that she didn't trust him. Clean, for his part, dismissed the tension lightly. When asked years later about the dynamic, he laughed it off. Meryl likes to prepare. I like to leap, that's all. But beneath the humor, he never denied the friction, only softened it. Streep never softened at all. She was professional, always polite at events, gracious in public, but she never accepted another project with Clean, despite multiple offers over the decades. Industry insiders say she quietly vetoed every script that would have reunited them. Their paths crossed at award shows where Streep kept a formal distance, the kind that speaks louder than any feud. Number 3. Jack Nicholson. In Hollywood, certain rivalries simmer quietly for decades, never exploding publicly, but shaping careers from the shadows. The tension between Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson is one of those rare, legendary Cold Wars. A feud that never made headlines, yet altered casting decisions, rewrote studio plans, and created one of the great what-if voids in film history. It began long before either of them openly acknowledged it. From the late 1970s onward, studios were desperate to pair the two icons. Heavy dramas, political thrillers, literary adaptations. Every year, new scripts were floated. Producers believed the combination of Nicholson's volcanic charisma and Streep's surgical precision would create instant box office history. But after a few early meetings, everything collapsed. The problem wasn't chemistry. It was philosophy. Streep viewed acting as moral duty, a vocation requiring discipline, research, and respect for truth. Nicholson viewed acting as swagger, instinct, provocation. He once said in an interview, half laughing, half mocking, preparation, that's intellectual masturbation. That line spread through Hollywood like a spark hitting dry brush. For most actors, it was Nicholson being Nicholson, irreverent, mischievous, unpredictable. For Streep, it was a knife. She had spent her life mastering technique, dialects, psychology, disappearing into characters with almost religious devotion. To hear one of Hollywood's most powerful men mock that dedication publicly felt to her like an attack on the craft itself. One person present at a studio meeting recalled the shift. Meryl's expression didn't change, but everyone in the room knew she was done. Nicholson didn't withdraw. He simply shrugged, amused by her intensity. He reportedly told a friend afterward, "She's brilliant, but man, a little tightly wound." That remark didn't help. Casting director Juliet Taylor later summarized the divide bluntly. Jack represents everything Meryl thinks is wrong with stardom. Streep never corrected her. Behind the scenes, she quietly vetoed project after project that included Nicholson's name. No shouting, no statements, no scandal, just a firm, unmovable line. Even when studios promised prestige, awards, or massive paydays, she refused. Number 4. Dustin Hoffman. In Hollywood, certain actors build their reputations on instinct and volatility. Others build theirs on discipline, trust, and emotional truth. Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman came from opposite ends of that spectrum, and their collision on Kramer vs. Kramer became one of the most quietly bitter divides in American film history. Streep approached acting the way a surgeon approaches an incision, carefully, respectfully, with full awareness of the emotional anatomy beneath the surface. Every silence, every breath, every shift in her voice was intentional. To her, the work was sacred, a partnership between actors built on consent and trust. Hoffman had a different creed entirely. He was a soldier of the method, a believer in chaos. He pushed limits, blurred boundaries, and brought real emotional violence into scenes if he believed it would spark a deeper truth. He once told a young actor, "You can't fake reality. You have to force it." And on the set of Kramer vs. Kramer, he forced it on Streep. The moment that defined their hostility happened early in production. In a scene meant to capture the raw tension between their characters, Hoffman suddenly slapped Streep across the face hard, without warning, without rehearsal, and definitely without consent. It was not in the script. It was not discussed. It was not safe. For Hoffman, it was a technique. For Streep, it was a violation. Crew members said the sound echoed through the set, followed by a stunned silence. Streep didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't break. She simply froze. The kind of silence that terrifies even seasoned directors. Later, she would describe the moment with surgical precision. That was overstepping. That was not acting. Those words weren't dramatic. They were factual. And they carried the weight of a wound she would never fully forgive. The tension only grew from there. Hoffman kept improvising, pushing, provoking. He threw real objects, screamed real insults, and delivered lines he'd never rehearsed. Director Robert Benton found himself less a filmmaker and more a mediator, caught between Street's disciplined artistry and Hoffman's chaos-first philosophy. One crew member said some of the most powerful moments weren't performances. They were eruptions. The world saw brilliance. Streep saw damage even after the film swept the Oscars. Hoffman winning Best Actor, Street winning Best Supporting Actress. Their personal battlefield remained scorched. She walked away with acclaim, but also with bruises of a different kind. Decades later, when asked about her experience with Hoffman, Streep didn't sugarcoat it. Professionally productive, she said, but personally intolerable. Hoffman's response over the years was more evasive. At times, he defended his methods. At others, he offered half apologies wrapped in artistic justification. He once said, "I was trying to help the scene. Maybe I pushed too far." But Street never softened. Not once. They were never cast together again. Number 5, Gwyneth Paltrow. If there was one thing that struck Meryl Streep deeply, it was the illusion of depth. The kind of stardom that appeared effortless because it was effortless. Not arrogance, but the polished version of fame built on privilege, branding, and a neatly packaged public persona. For Street, acting had always been work. Serious, disciplined, earned the hard way. So when Gwyneth Paltrow rose quickly in 1990s, Streep didn't see a promising young artist. She saw a symbol of what Hollywood was turning into. Paltrow's path was paved from the start. Blee Danner for a mother, Bruce Paltrow for a father. She didn't climb, she stepped in. Roles landed at her feet, doors opened without resistance. Critics praised every movement. And while Hollywood celebrated her elegance, Streep remained noticeably silent. A silence that said more than any words. A longtime friend later recalled one of Streep's private comments. It's talent without the work, fame without the struggle. To Paltrow represented a new kind of celebrity, effortless, inherited, and propelled by timing and connections. Nothing highlighted that divide more than the night, everything crystallized. The Oscars. Paltrow won Best Actress for Shakespeare in Love. Streep, after delivering one of her most demanding performances in One True Thing, left empty-handed. She smiled for the cameras, but privately she was furious. Friends said she dismissed that year's race as a marketing contest dressed up as an award. She never uttered Paltrow's name, but everyone knew who she meant. From then on, the distance only grew. When asked about rising actresses, Streep praised Cate Blanchett, Amy Adams, Jessica Chastain, women known for rigorous preparation, but she never mentioned Paltrow. Not once. Insiders noticed the frost. Brief smiles at award shows, quick nods, no warmth, no conversation. Paltrow publicly always stayed polite. Early in her career, when asked about Street, she replied with a carefully rehearsed line. Meryl is the greatest. I adore her. Everyone does. But privately, she felt the chill. A former publicist recalled her sighing backstage. Meryl's never like me. I don't know what I ever did. Number 6, Jeremy Irons. Among all the names Meryl Streep has carried quietly in her long memory, Jeremy Irons may be the most surprising, not because of any public blow-up, but because of how spectacular their collaboration should have been. Two classically trained powerhouses, two actors revered for their technique and intelligence. On paper, it was a perfect match. In reality, it was a quiet disaster. To Street, acting was excavation, digging into the bones of a character, searching for trauma, truth, and emotional history. Every detail mattered. The way a person walked, the shape of a vowel, the breath before a line. She often said, an accent isn't performance. It's biography. Jeremy Irons, however, saw the craft differently. To him, acting was architecture, elegant, controlled, sculpted. He approached roles like polished marble statues, refined, restrained, and precise. The emotional chaos Streep embraced felt to him excessive. What began as artistic difference shifted into something colder. One rehearsal became infamous among the crew. Streep had been working meticulously on her character's accent, layering cultural nuance into every phrase. Irons listened, waited, then reportedly said, "It's very technical. Don't you think the audience will care more about the feeling than the phonetics?" The room froze. To Irons, it was a mild comment. To Streep, it was sacrilege, a dismissal of the very foundation of her process. A crew member later said, "You could feel the air change. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She just hardened." From that moment, the line was drawn. Irons found her process indulgent. Streep found as emotionally vacant. Their scenes turned into duels, his cool detachment clashing with her raw vulnerability. They stood inches apart, delivering lines that vibrated with tension the script never called for. Crew members whispered that they had never seen two actors so physically close and yet feel so emotionally distant. One assistant director described it perfectly. They were in the same scene, but in two different worlds. Irons tried to remain diplomatic afterward. When asked years later about working with Streep, he said with a hint of distance, "We simply approach things differently. She digs inward. I build outward." Streep was less charitable. Without naming him, she once remarked in an interview, "Some actors mistake restraint for depth, stillness for truth." Everyone knew who she meant. Their relationship never recovered. They were cordial in public, polite at industry events, but utterly incompatible. Neither ever sought a second collaboration, and producers quickly learned that pitching a project involving both was an exercise in futility. And so, as the dust settles on these long-guarded tensions, one thing becomes clear. Even the most decorated actress of her generation carried silent battles that shaped her career in ways the public never saw. 6 actors, 6 stories, and a lifetime of unspoken grudges finally brought into the light at age 76. But which of these clashes surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dive stories like this. Until next time.